They laughed when she walked on stage. Then she shattered Stanford's debate tournament. Before we dive into today's story, please press the subscribe button. Also, drop a comment from which city you're watching. We love hearing where our community is tuning in from. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the story. The question cut through the Stanford debate hall like ice water through silk. Who exactly let you in here? The voice belonged to Harrison Pemberton IV, whose name alone carried more weight at Stanford than most people's entire resumes. Standing 6'2" in his perfectly pressed navy blazer, with sandy hair that had never seen a day of humidity, he embodied everything the Ivy League, or in this case, elite West Coast academia, represented. His smirk was practiced, the kind that had been perfected through generations of inherited privilege. The target of his disdain stood near the back of the Gothic Revival lecture hall, clutching a worn notebook against her chest like armor. 17-year-old Jasmine Rodriguez had traveled over 2,000 miles from the lower Ninth Ward of New Orleans, her second-hand blazer hanging just slightly too loose on her small frame, her Converse sneakers scuffed from years of use rather than fashion. The Stanford National Debate Invitational had drawn the country's most elite young minds, students from Phillips Exeter, Dalton School, and other institutions where tuition cost more than most families made in a year. Among these polished products of private education stood Jasmine, her voice carrying the warm molasses cadence of Louisiana, her presence as foreign to this world as a jazz funeral in Silicon Valley. Whispers rippled through the assembled crowd, like wind through expensive wheat. Is she even supposed to be here? I thought this was invitation only. Did admissions make some kind of mistake? Every word found its mark, but Jasmine kept her dark eyes fixed on the front of the room where Professor Catherine Sterling stood arranging speaker schedules. Professor Sterling's reputation preceded her, a former Supreme Court clerk, known for her surgical precision in dismantling weak arguments and her legendary inability to be impressed by anything short of perfection. The first day was designed for networking and preliminary rounds, a chance for students to size each other up while engaging in the elaborate social choreography that defined elite academic circles. Designer handbags were compared, prep school connections established, and summer internships at prestigious law firms casually mentioned. Jasmine found herself gravitating toward a corner window, watching the California sun cast long shadows across the manicured campus. Her notebook, filled with handwritten speeches and debate strategies refined during countless late nights at her mother's kitchen table, felt suddenly inadequate in this world of MacBook Pros and research assistants. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory. "You don't need to dress like them, baby girl. You just need to think circles around them." Harrison's voice boomed again across the hall. "Professor Sterling, are we accepting community outreach participants this year?" His friends, a carefully curated collection of privilege and ambition, erupted in laughter that felt both spontaneous and calculated. Professor Sterling's response was swift and sharp. "That's quite enough, Mr. Pemberton." The room fell silent, with the sudden intensity of a record scratch. Harrison offered a theatrical bow, pretending contrition, while his eyes sparkled with mischief. The damage, however, had been done. Jasmine felt heat rise up her neck, but her spine remained straight, her dignity intact. That afternoon, Professor Sterling announced the first elimination topic with the kind of dramatic flair that made careers in academia. Resolved. The role of socioeconomic background in university admissions should be minimized. The irony wasn't lost on Jasmine. As she scribbled notes, her heart hammered against her ribs. This wasn't just a debate topic. It was her life story. Her right to exist in spaces like this one, condensed into a formal resolution. While other students formed study groups with the natural ease of the well-connected, Jasmine claimed a lonely corner of the library. Her fingers flew across her laptop's keyboard, pulling research from Supreme Court decisions, demographic studies, and the hard-won knowledge of someone who had lived the statistics others merely cited. Her phone buzzed, a text from her mother. "You've got this, Mija. Show them what Louisiana girls are made of." Jasmine smiled, closed the message, and dove back into her research. Somewhere in the depths of her preparation, a quiet fire began to burn. Not the rage of the excluded, but the steady determination of someone who belonged exactly where she stood. The morning of the first elimination round arrived gray and ominous. Typical Northern California weather that seemed to mirror the mood in Sanders' auditorium. The Gothic architecture loomed overhead like a cathedral of intellectual combat, all soaring arches and polished wood that whispered of centuries of academic tradition. Jasmine stood at the side entrance, watching the crowd file in. Students, professors, and even a few journalists, covering what had become an unexpectedly compelling tournament. Her name sat at the bottom of the speaking order, relegated to the position traditionally reserved for afterthoughts and diversity statistics. She adjusted her blazer one final time and walked in. Harrison, naturally, commanded the opening slot. He took the stage like he was born for it, which in many ways he had been. His voice carried perfectly through the hall as he wove statistics together with personal anecdotes, his delivery polished to a mirror shine through years of private coaching and prep school debate teams. When Harrison finished, the judges leaned forward with barely concealed approval, their pens moving across evaluation sheets with obvious enthusiasm. The next speakers followed in succession, polished, confident, speaking with the practiced rhythm of students who had spent summers at debate camps that cost more than many cars. Jasmine listened intently, cataloging weaknesses and missed opportunities, while the knot in her stomach tightened with each passing speech. Then came her moment. Next speaker, Jasmine Rodriguez, representing New Orleans Southeast Public Forum. The announcement echoed awkwardly through the suddenly quiet hall. A beat of uncomfortable silence followed, broken only by the soft scratch of pens being set down and the subtle shift of bodies in seats. Jasmine rose slowly, each step toward the podium feeling like a mile. She passed rows of students who watched with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed amusement. Some smiled with the kind of condescension that masqueraded as encouragement. Others simply stared, waiting for the inevitable stumble. Professor. Sterling sat at the judges' table, her expression unreadable as stone. Jasmine placed her notebook on the podium, her hands steady, despite the electricity coursing through her veins. She adjusted the microphone, cleared her throat, and spoke her opening line with deliberate softness. Before I begin, I'd like to thank Stanford for this invitation, even if some people in this room seem surprised I'm here. The ripple of gasps and nervous laughter was immediate and electric. She didn't pause for it to settle. With crystalline clarity, she launched into her argument. She didn't possess Harrison's theatrical flourishes or years of professional coaching, but she had something else entirely. The unshakable conviction that comes from living your argument rather than simply researching it. She spoke of systemic barriers and unconscious bias, of communities where schools lacked basic resources, let alone debate programs. She quoted Supreme Court precedents and referenced longitudinal studies on educational outcomes with the precision of someone who had done her homework without the benefit of research assistance. Then, without warning, she shifted into personal narrative. Some of us weren't born with legacy admission letters waiting in our mailboxes, she said, her eyes finding Harrison's across the room. Some of us had to earn every single invitation we ever received, including this one. Before we get into the heart of this story, if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button to join the community and share your thoughts on the story. The charged silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full, pregnant with tension. And sudden attention. Her closing landed like a perfectly thrown punch. Minimizing the impact of socioeconomic background in admissions isn't about charity or lowering standards. It's about fairness. It's about recognizing potential wherever it grows. And it's about ensuring that the next Jasmine Rodriguez doesn't have to stand here proving she deserves a seat at a table she's already earned. Her voice never wavered. Not once. As she stepped down, the room held its breath for one beat longer than necessary. Then came the applause, Scattered at first, then building, not overwhelming but undeniably real. Harrison's smirk followed her as she passed. Under his breath, just loud enough for her to hear. Cute speech. Let's see if it actually matters. But Jasmine didn't respond. She walked past him with her shoulders back and head high because something fundamental had shifted in that room, and they both knew it. The preliminary rankings appeared on the announcement board like Judgment Day distilled into a single sheet of paper. Jasmine approached with her heart hammering against her ribs, each name on the list representing another obstacle to overcome. She scanned frantically until she found it. Jasmine Rodriguez, rank 12, just above the cutoff line. Relief flooded through her like cool water. She wasn't at the top, but she wasn't going home either. She had survived the first cut. Behind her, Harrison's unmistakable voice carried, "Well, would you look at that? Miracles really do happen." Jasmine kept walking, but the whispers followed. Who is she again? Some public school kid from Louisiana. Has to be a diversity. Pick. No way she actually scored higher than Madison or Emma. That evening, alone in her tiny dorm room, Jasmine spread her research notes across the narrow bed like a general planning a campaign. The next topic had arrived via email. Resolved. Affirmative action policies do more harm than good. The bitter irony wasn't lost on her. They were going to force her to defend or attack the very policies that might have opened this door, at least in their minds. For several minutes, she stared at her laptop screen, doubt creeping in like fog off the San Francisco Bay. What if they were right? What if she was only here because of some checkbox on an admission form? What if her next speech would be her last? Her phone buzzed. "Remember, baby girl, you've never needed anyone's permission to be brilliant." Jasmine smiled at her mother's message, then opened a dozen research tabs simultaneously. Supreme Court cases, statistical analyses, personal testimonies, from students like herself. But she went further, outlining arguments for both sides of the resolution. If they wanted to trap her, she'd make sure she knew every possible escape route. The next morning brought Harrison to the podium first again, delivering a performance that blended cherry-picked statistics with carefully coded language. "We should admit students based on merit," he declared, his gaze briefly finding Jasmine in the audience. "Not sympathy or social engineering." Polite laughter rippled through the crowd. The judges smiled and scribbled notes. When Jasmine's name was called, the air thickened with expectation and skepticism. She rose and walked steadily to the podium. "This conversation isn't about lowering standards," she began, her voice calm but unwavering. "It's about recognizing that the playing field has never been level." She didn't stop there. She cited historical data on legacy admissions, the percentage of Stanford's student body from the top 1% income bracket, the invisible advantages baked into the system long before students filled out their first application. Then she paused, letting the silence build. "If you believe that only grades and test scores should determine worth," she continued, "then ask yourself, how many of you sitting here today would be here without private tutors, elite prep schools, and parents who knew how to navigate the I system before you could even spell Stanford?" The room shifted uncomfortably. Jaws tightened. Students exchanged glances. Harrison's confident smirk began to falter. Jasmine closed with quiet intensity. Leveling the playing field isn't about giving anyone a free pass. It's about making sure the next generation of leaders and thinkers doesn't look exactly like the last. The applause came quicker this time, stronger, undeniable. Professor Sterling's eyes followed Jasmine as she returned to her seat. For the first time, there was something different in her expression, not indifference, but recognition. The quarterfinal bracket listed Jasmine at rank 7. She had climbed higher than anyone expected, including herself. Harrison remained at number 1, but something felt different now, an undercurrent of tension she couldn't quite identify. Walking past the bulletin board, she noticed 2 of Harrison's Friends huddled nearby, laughing quietly while glancing in her direction. As she passed, one muttered just loud enough for her to hear, "Let's see how she handles tomorrow's surprise." Her stomach twisted with foreboding. That evening, an email appeared in her inbox with the subject line, "Revised Topic Assignment. Urgent, from Debate Committee, Stanford.edu." The message looked official enough. "Due to scheduling conflicts, your debate topic has been switched. Please prepare to argue the following resolution tomorrow. Resolved. The American education system rewards conformity over creativity. Failure to comply will result in disqualification." Panic flooded her system. She scrolled through earlier communications. Nothing mentioned any topic changes. None of the other competitors had reported similar updates. Every instinct screamed that something was wrong, but with less than 10 hours until her round, she had no choice but to adapt. She abandoned her previous preparation and started over, researching frantically, writing desperately, rehearsing until her voice grew hoarse. By 2 a.m., her eyes burned, but she had a speech. She fell asleep with her laptop still glowing on her chest. The next morning, approaching the check-in table with her hastily prepared notes, she heard Professor Sterling call her name. "Miss Rodriguez, where have you been?" Sterling's tone carried sharp annoyance. "You're supposed to be preparing for your assigned topic." Jasmine blinked, confused. "I've been working on the topic change." The email said, "What email?" Jasmine showed her the message. Professor Sterling's expression darkened as she examined the sender address. "This isn't from us," Sterling said coldly. "This is fake." Jasmine's heart plummeted. Her hands began to shake. "Who would—" "You were supposed to prepare for the assigned topic. Resolved. Technology has eroded authentic human communication. Your round starts in 5 minutes." Across the room, Harrison caught her eye. His smirk was unmistakable. He tilted his head slightly, mouthing silently, "Oops." Jasmine's throat constricted. She faced an impossible choice. Walk out in defeat or walk up unprepared. Her mother's voice rose in her memory, steady and uncompromising. "You didn't come this far to fold now, Mija." Jasmine straightened her spine. She grabbed a blank notepad and pen, sprinted to an empty corner, and began scribbling ideas at lightning speed. Technology, communication, authentic connection. She could work with this. When her name was called, she walked to the podium with her heart hammering so loudly, she wondered if the microphone would pick it up. For one moment, she closed her eyes and breathed. Then she spoke. Her voice wavered initially, but as momentum built, clarity returned. She spoke from lived experience about social media's corrosive effect on friendships, about screen addiction replacing real conversation in her community, about how even here, students seemed more interested in Instagram stories than genuine dialogue. It wasn't her most researched speech, but it was authentic, raw, and ultimately powerful. As she stepped down, Harrison's smile had vanished entirely. Professor Sterling didn't applaud, but her gaze lingered on Jasmine longer than ever before. The semi-final brackets posted the next morning showed Jasmine at rank 5. Even sabotaged, she had advanced. The bitter satisfaction was tempered by the knowledge that more challenges lay ahead. Professor Sterling appeared beside her as she studied the results. "Miss Rodriguez, I need to speak with you privately." They walked to Sterling's office, walls lined with debate trophies and photographs of past champions, a shrine to academic excellence that seemed to judge everyone who entered. "I reviewed that email you received," Sterling began without preamble. "It was spoofed. Someone masked their address to appear official." Jasmine's throat tightened. "Do you know who sent it?" Sterling's eyes narrowed. "Not yet, but the administration is investigating. For now, keep your focus on the competition." "I don't want to just keep my head down, Professor. Someone tried to sabotage me." Sterling leaned back, studying her. "I admire your spirit, but understand. This place can be ruthless to those who make waves." After a long pause, Sterling's voice softened fractionally. Make it to the finals. Then we'll have a different conversation. The semi-final topic was announced that evening. Resolved. Social movements driven by digital activism are less effective than traditional grassroots organizing. Perfect. This was territory Jasmine knew intimately. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling data from case studies on Black Lives Matter, the Arab Spring, Hurricane Katrina relief efforts in her own community. Her personal connection to the subject infused every argument with passionate conviction. But even as she prepared, the feeling that another shoe was about to drop never left her. Jasmine's semi-final opponent was Victoria Chen, ranked second, a product of Phillips Academy with a debate resume that read like academic poetry. As they faced each other on stage, Victoria offered a polite smile that held no warmth. Victoria opened with calculated precision, strategic points, methodical takedowns, transitions so smooth they seemed choreographed. She was everything the system had groomed her to be. When Jasmine took the microphone, she transformed the room. She spoke of lived experience, of watching online petitions translate into real policy changes in her neighborhood, of how digital activism had become the only megaphone for marginalized voices. Her voice caught only once, when she mentioned losing her cousin during Hurricane Katrina and how online fundraising had been the sole reason her family could rebuild. The auditorium fell completely silent in that moment. By the end, even Victoria appeared shaken. The judge's announcement rang out clear. The winner, advancing to the final round, Jasmine Rodriguez. Scattered applause erupted, hesitant but real. She had done the impossible, climbed from forgotten afterthought to championship finalist. As she left the stage, Professor Sterling approached quietly. "Be ready," she said in a voice only Jasmine could hear. "The next round won't just test your debating skill." Behind Sterling, Harrison Pemberton stood against the wall, arms crossed, eyes dark with something that went beyond competitive frustration. In the final, it would be Jasmine versus Harrison, and both knew this was about much more than a trophy. Championship morning dawned gray and heavy, as if the Bay Area itself understood the weight of what was coming. Sanders Auditorium was packed. Beyond capacity, faculty, alumni, students, and reporters drawn by a narrative too compelling to ignore. The debate between the Louisiana girl and Stanford royalty had captured imaginations far beyond the campus. Camera crews lined the back wall, their equipment pointed toward a stage that would determine more than just an academic champion. Backstage, Jasmine sat with her worn notebook, fingers tracing the edges of pages filled with her mother's handwriting. Encouragement. Scrolled in the margins during late-night prep sessions. Her heart raced, but her breathing remained controlled. Across the room, Harrison paced with predatory confidence while his supporters offered final words of encouragement. She caught fragments of conversation. Easy victory. Just overwhelm. Her in cross-examination. She'll crack under pressure. But Jasmine had moved beyond caring about their predictions. Professor Sterling approached her quietly. "You're about to step into a room that wasn't designed for people like you," she said, her voice carrying decades of institutional knowledge. "But make no mistake, you've earned every moment of this spotlight." The final topic glowed on the main screen. Resolved. Traditional institutions remain the best guardians of academic integrity. The irony was so thick, Jasmine almost laughed out loud. The moderator's voice boomed across the packed auditorium. "Welcome to the championship round of the Stanford National Invitational. Representing the Eastern Prep Division, Harrison Pemberton. IV. Representing the Southeast Public Forum, Jasmine Rodriguez." Thunderous applause erupted, though Jasmine noticed Harrison's section was notably louder. Harrison opened with a masterclass in privileged rhetoric. He painted elite institutions as noble guardians of knowledge and tradition, referencing decades of academic research and quoting former education secretaries. His delivery was flawless, charismatic, designed to comfort an audience that saw themselves reflected in his words. The crowd ate it up like expensive wine. When Jasmine's turn came, she approached the podium with deliberate calm. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the suddenly attentive hall, "we're here to debate who gets to decide what academic integrity looks like." She paused, making eye contact with judges, audience members, and Harrison himself. "And I stand before you as living proof that sometimes the very institutions we trust are the first ones to silence voices they don't recognize." A visible ripple moved through the audience like wind through wheat. She didn't stop. Without naming names, Jasmine detailed the sabotage attempt, making clear that institutional gatekeeping wasn't theoretical. It was happening in real time, in real places, to real people. She cited historical examples, universities that once barred women, then minorities, then anyone who didn't fit their narrow definition of belonging. Her voice rose with passionate conviction. Integrity isn't just about preserving traditions. It's about evolving beyond the ones that kept people out in the first place. The cross-examination phase that followed was brutal. Harrison attacked, aggressively, questioning her statistics, challenging her definitions, attempting to interrupt her responses. But Jasmine remained unshakable. "You're deflecting from the actual argument, Mr. Pemberton," she said at one point, her voice cool as mountain water. "Let's return to the resolution." The audience leaned forward, sensing they were witnessing something special. In her rebuttal, Jasmine dismantled Harrison's core premise with surgical precision. "If traditional institutions were perfect guardians of integrity, I wouldn't have had to fight through sabotage attempts just to stand on this stage today." The words hung in the air like a challenge that couldn't be ignored. For the first time all tournament, Harrison's polished facade cracked. His confident smile disappeared. His rebuttal came across as rushed, defensive, desperate. When both debaters concluded their arguments, Sanders' auditorium sat in charged silence. Then the applause began, not polite or scattered, but thunderous and real, rolling through the hall like a wave. Jasmine stepped back from the podium, her breath coming in short bursts. Harrison stared at the floor, jaw clenched, refusing to meet her eyes. Professor Sterling, standing near the judge's table, offered Jasmine the faintest nod of approval. But the winner hadn't been announced yet. The wait felt eternal. Both debaters were escorted to a side room while judges deliberated, the minutes stretching like hours. Jasmine could hear muffled voices from the judging chamber, intense discussion punctuated by brief laughter, then more serious debate. Harrison paced the small waiting area, his earlier arrogance replaced by obvious anxiety. For once, he couldn't make eye contact with anyone. Finally, Professor Sterling emerged. "The results will be announced in 2 minutes." Sanders' auditorium buzzed with electric anticipation as they returned. Phones appeared throughout the crowd. Harrison's friends occupied the front row in their matching Stanford merchandise, while Jasmine's section remained small but vocal, fellow competitors she'd befriended and a single news crew that had followed her story. The moderator took center stage, holding a sealed envelope like it contained the secrets of the universe. After extensive deliberation, he began, his voice carrying to every corner of the packed hall. "The judges have reached their decision." He opened the envelope with deliberate slowness. "The champion of the 2025 Stanford National Invitational is..." The pause felt like falling off a cliff. "Jasmine Rodriguez." The room exploded. For one heart-stopping moment, Jasmine wondered if she'd misheard. Then reality crashed over her like a wave as applause thundered through the auditorium. Not polite, obligatory clapping, genuine, enthusiastic applause from unexpected corners of the room. Students stood. Faculty members nodded approvingly. Even some of Harrison's supporters seemed stunned into admiration. Harrison himself had already vanished, unwilling to witness his defeat or offer congratulations. Professor Sterling approached with an extended hand. "Congratulations," she said, her voice carrying genuine warmth for the first time. "You didn't just win a debate tournament. You proved that excellence comes from places this institution is still learning to recognize. As cameras flashed and people surged forward, Jasmine's phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Told you, baby girl, you never needed their permission to shine." Jasmine blinked back sudden tears, lifted her chin and smiled with pure, unguarded joy. Later that evening, as campus settled into quiet, Jasmine sat alone on the steps outside Sanders Auditorium. The crisp California air carried the scent of eucalyptus and possibility. Professor Sterling's shadow fell across the steps. "Mind if I join you?" They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Sterling spoke. The administration completed their investigation into that email. Jasmine's stomach tightened. And Harrison Pemberton sent it. The digital forensics were conclusive. Jasmine exhaled slowly. Despite suspecting it, hearing confirmation still felt like a punch to the chest. What happens to him? Disciplinary. Review. Nothing public. Stanford protects its image, but his future in competitive debate is effectively over. Jasmine stared at the distant lights of campus. "I didn't want it to end like that." Sterling nodded. "I know. That's what makes you different from him." They watched students walk past, returning from late dinners and study sessions, most unaware that history had been made in their auditorium just hours earlier. "You know what this means, don't you?" Sterling asked finally. Jasmine looked at her professor. "You've changed something here. Not just won a tournament, but shifted how people think about who belongs in these rooms." 3 weeks later, back on her front porch in New Orleans, Jasmine sat sipping sweet tea as the Louisiana sun painted everything golden. Her mother emerged from the house holding an envelope bearing Stanford's official seal. Inside, a formal invitation to Stanford's summer pre-law program, full scholarship included, with a personal note from Professor Sterling. "Can't wait to see how far you'll take this." Jasmine smiled, her heart full of something she'd never quite felt before. Not just pride in her achievement, but confidence in her right to achieve it. From being questioned about her presence to being celebrated for her brilliance. From fighting for a voice to standing as proof that voices like hers could change rooms, challenge systems, and rewrite the rules about who gets to sit at tables of power. The girl from the lower 9th Ward had done more than win a debate tournament. She had shown that excellence doesn't require a zip code, that intelligence doesn't need an accent coach, and that sometimes the most powerful arguments come from those who have lived them rather than simply studied them. And in the end, that was the most convincing argument of all.